The prison had been locked down for 12 straight hours. Every cell door was shut. Every hallway was silent. Armed officers stood at every corner with worried faces. The prison warden stared at dozens of computer screens, unable to believe what investigators had just discovered. "It can't be him," one detective whispered. But it was. One inmate had been running a criminal empire from behind bars. His orders had reached cities across America. Money moved every single day. Witnesses suddenly refused to speak. Trucks disappeared. Secret packages changed hands. Even people outside the prison were taking orders from a man who had not stepped beyond the prison walls in 11 years. His name was Mason Reed. He looked like any other inmate. Gray prison clothes. Quiet voice. Calm face. He spent most days reading books in his tiny cell. Guards believed he was one of the easiest prisoners to manage. They were completely wrong. A hidden investigation had finally uncovered messages leaving the prison almost every day. Nobody knew how. Nobody knew who was helping him. Every clue pointed back to cell 214. The officers rushed toward Mason's cell. When they forced the steel door open, they found something that made every person in the room freeze. Mason Reed was smiling, and sitting on his small metal bed was an object that should never have been inside a maximum security prison. The detective slowly reached for it. But before anyone could touch it, every light inside the prison suddenly went dark. No one knew what had just happened. And that was only the beginning. 3 years earlier, Blackstone State Prison was one of the hardest prisons in America. Tall concrete walls surrounded the entire building. Sharp wire covered every fence. Cameras watched every hallway. Guards checked every door again and again. Nothing was supposed to get in. Nothing was supposed to get out. New correctional officer Daniel Brooks had just started his first week. He wanted to prove himself. Daniel believed every rule mattered. He greeted every inmate the same way. He treated everyone fairly but never trusted anyone. The older guards laughed. "You'll learn," Officer Carl Harris said with a tired smile. "This place changes people." Daniel looked down the long prison hallway. Heavy steel doors lined both sides. Cold air filled every corner. Loud metal sounds echoed through the building. Somewhere far away, an inmate shouted. Another laughed. The prison never truly became quiet. During morning count, Daniel noticed one inmate acting differently. Most prisoners talked to each other. Some argued. Others stared at the floor. But Mason Reed simply sat on his bunk reading an old history book. He never looked nervous. He never complained. When Daniel called his name, Mason calmly answered, "Present." Nothing more. Officer Harris noticed Daniel watching him. "Forget about Reed," Harris said. "He's harmless." Daniel nodded, but something did not feel right. Harmless people did not make every nearby inmate stay silent whenever they walked past. Later that afternoon, Daniel watched prisoners enter the dining hall. Something strange happened. Without saying a single word, Mason walked across the room carrying his food tray. As he passed different tables, several inmates quietly moved their cups to the left side of their trays. Others folded their napkins twice. One man scratched his ear before sitting down. None of it looked important. But every movement happened only after Mason walked by. Daniel frowned. Too many people were making tiny actions at exactly the right time. It looked almost like signals. That evening, Daniel mentioned it to Officer Harris. "You've been watching too many crime shows," Harris laughed. "Prisoners have strange habits." Maybe he was right. Still, Daniel could not stop thinking about it. Over the next several days, he paid closer attention. Whenever Mason entered the library, certain inmates arrived exactly 5 minutes later. Whenever Mason finished exercising, someone else suddenly asked to clean another hallway. Whenever Mason received mail, 3 different prisoners smiled before anyone even announced their names. No one spoke. Yet everyone seemed to know something. Daniel began writing every strange detail inside a small notebook he kept in his locker. Dates, times, names, patterns. Little by little, the pages filled. Then one rainy evening, while checking empty storage rooms near cell block C, Daniel heard two inmates whispering through an air vent. He already approved it. When? This morning. How did the message get out? A short silence followed. Then came the answer that made Daniel's heart pound. The boss never needs to leave his cell. Before Daniel could hear another word, a loud alarm echoed through the prison. Every officer ran toward cell block D. An inmate had collapsed in the yard. But as Daniel rushed away with the others, he had no idea that someone had been watching him from the shadows. And inside cell 214, Mason Reed slowly closed his history book, looked directly toward the security camera, and smiled. Daniel Brooks could not forget the smile on Mason Reed's face. It was not the smile of a scared inmate. It was the smile of someone who already knew what was going to happen next. The next morning, Daniel arrived early for his shift. He unlocked his locker and reached for the small notebook where he had written every strange thing he had seen. It was gone. He searched every shelf. He checked inside his uniform pockets. He looked under the bench. Nothing. Someone had taken it. Daniel felt a chill run down his back. He had never told anyone about the notebook except himself. That meant someone inside the prison knew he had been watching Mason. He quietly closed his locker and looked around. Several officers were talking near the break room. Everything looked normal. But Daniel no longer believed anything inside Blackstone State Prison was normal. Instead of saying anything, he started a new notebook. This time, he hid it inside the lining of his work bag. That afternoon, Warden Samuel Grant called all officers into a meeting. "There have been reports of unusual activity," the warden said. "No rumors leave this room. If you notice anything strange, report it immediately." The room stayed silent. Nobody mentioned Mason Reed. Nobody mentioned secret signals. Daniel wondered why. After the meeting, Officer Carl Harris pulled Daniel aside. "You've been asking too many questions." Daniel looked surprised. "I'm just trying to do my job." Carl sighed. "I know. But in this prison, curiosity can become dangerous." Before Daniel could ask what he meant, Carl walked away. Those words stayed in Daniel's mind for the rest of the day. Later, Daniel was assigned to watch the prison library. It was one of the quietest places in the building. Rows of old books covered the shelves. Only a few inmates were allowed inside at one time. Mason Reed entered carrying 2 books. He nodded politely to Daniel before walking to a table in the corner. For nearly an hour, Mason did nothing except turn pages. Then another inmate walked over. Without speaking, he picked up the wrong book from the shelf. Mason looked up for only 1 second. The inmate immediately returned the book and picked a different one. Then he left. Daniel noticed something sticking out between the pages of the first book. After Mason returned his books and left the library, Daniel quickly walked to the shelf. His heart raced. Inside the book was nothing. No note. No paper. No hidden message. Just an empty page. Daniel frowned. Had he imagined it? As he placed the book back, he noticed tiny pencil marks near the page numbers. Very small dots. Almost impossible to see. He opened another history book. More tiny dots. Another book. More marks. None of them formed words. Instead, they looked like a secret code. Daniel carefully copied the page numbers into his notebook. That evening, he searched through prison records. Every marked book had been checked out by Mason Reed during the past 6 months. Too many times to be a coincidence. Before Daniel could study further, the phone on his desk rang. "Officer Brooks. Report to the mailroom immediately." When Daniel arrived, several officers stood around a large table. Dozens of letters had been opened for inspection. Most contained family news, birthday cards, simple drawings from children. One envelope caught Daniel's eye. The paper was completely blank. No writing. No picture. Nothing. Why keep an empty letter? Daniel asked. The mail supervisor shrugged. It passed inspection. Nothing illegal. Daniel held the blank paper under the bright light. Still nothing. Just before placing it back, he tilted it toward the window. Very faint lines appeared across the page. Invisible ink. Someone had written an entire message that could only be seen from the right angle. Daniel quickly called the supervisor over. By the time they looked together, the writing had disappeared again. The paper looked blank once more. The supervisor frowned. "I don't see anything." Daniel knew what he had seen. Someone was sending hidden messages through the prison mail. But who was receiving them? That night, Daniel stayed late. He reviewed camera footage from the library, hour after hour. Nothing unusual. Then, just before midnight, he noticed something. Every camera froze for exactly 9 seconds. Not once. Not twice. Every single day. Always at the exact same time. 9 missing seconds. 9 seconds when nobody could see what happened. The next morning, Daniel reported everything to Warden Grant. The missing notebook. The strange code inside the library books. The invisible letter. The frozen cameras. The warden listened carefully without interrupting. Finally, he spoke. "If you're right, someone inside this prison is helping Reed." Daniel nodded. "I think he's communicating with people outside." The warden stood and locked his office door. Then he opened a hidden drawer in his desk. Inside was a thick file stamped in red. "Confidential." Warden Grant placed it on the desk. "I hoped I would never have to show anyone this." Daniel opened the file. The first page contained a list of unsolved robberies, missing money, witness disappearances, and organized crimes from across the country. Every case had one thing in common. Each crime had happened after Mason Reed was sent to prison. Before Daniel could turn the next page, every emergency siren inside Blackstone State Prison suddenly began screaming. A panicked voice blasted through the loudspeakers. "Officer down! Officer down! Cell Block C has been breached." Daniel and the warden raced toward the hallway. Neither of them knew that the emergency was only a distraction, because at that exact moment, someone was unlocking the door to cell 214 from the outside. Daniel Brooks sprinted down the hallway as the emergency sirens echoed through every corner of Blackstone State Prison. Officers rushed toward Cell Block C from every direction. Boots pounded against the concrete floor. Radios buzzed with confused voices. What happened? Who was hurt? Lock every hallway. Daniel followed Warden Samuel Grant through the crowd until they reached Cell Block C. An officer was sitting on the floor, holding his shoulder. "I'm okay," he said. "Someone pushed me from behind." Daniel looked around. Nothing else seemed wrong. No inmates had escaped. No doors had been forced open. The whole emergency felt strange. The warden frowned. "This doesn't make sense." Daniel suddenly remembered something. The sirens. What about them? They pulled every officer away from Cell Block A. The warden's eyes grew wide. "Mason." The two men turned and ran as fast as they could. By the time they reached Cell 214, the hallway was empty. The steel door was closed. Daniel unlocked it. Inside, Mason Reed was sitting on his bed with a book resting on his lap. He looked up calmly. "You seem busy today," Mason said. Daniel searched every inch of the cell. The bed, the sink, the toilet, the walls. Everything looked normal. Too normal. The officer assigned to watch the hallway scratched his head. "I only stepped away for a minute after the alarm." Daniel exchanged a worried look with the warden. 1 minute was more than enough. Someone had opened Mason's cell. Someone had closed it again. And no one knew why. Back in the security office, technicians reviewed the camera footage. Again, the video froze. 9 missing seconds. The same exact gap. Every camera watching Cell 214 had stopped at the same time. Daniel slammed his hand against the desk. "Someone is doing this on purpose." The technician nodded. "The cameras aren't broken. They're being interrupted." From inside the prison, the room fell silent. If someone inside controlled the cameras, then Mason had help. The question was, who? Over the next week, Daniel stopped looking only at inmates. He started watching prison employees, maintenance workers, kitchen staff, mail clerks, cleaning crews, even correctional officers. He noticed something interesting. A maintenance worker named Eric Lawson always repaired equipment near cell block A. Every single week. Sometimes twice. Daniel checked the work records. Eric had requested those assignments himself. Daniel decided to follow him from a distance. Eric repaired a light fixture. Then a water pipe. Then a broken vent. Everything looked normal. Until Eric reached the hallway outside cell 214. He bent down beside a loose floor drain. His toolbox blocked Daniel's view for only a few seconds. When Eric stood up again, he quietly walked away. Daniel waited. Then he walked over to the drain. Inside was a tiny folded piece of paper. His heart pounded. He carefully pulled it out. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. Just 6 words. Shipment Friday. Route changed. Stay ready. No names. No signature. Nothing else. Daniel immediately rushed to find Eric. But the maintenance worker had disappeared. His truck was already gone. When investigators searched Eric's employee file, they found something shocking. The address listed for him did not exist. The phone number belonged to someone else. Even his emergency contact was fake. Eric Lawson had been working inside Blackstone State Prison for almost 2 years. Nobody knew who he really was. A nationwide search began immediately. But Eric had vanished without leaving a trace. That evening, federal investigators arrived at the prison. Special Agent Rebecca Turner introduced herself to Daniel. "We've been tracking a criminal network for over 3 years," she said. "We believe Reed is giving orders from prison." Daniel handed her the note from the drain. Rebecca read it twice. "This matches messages we've recovered in several investigations." Daniel looked surprised. "You've seen this code before?" Rebecca nodded. "The words seem simple. But every sentence hides another meaning." She spread several photographs across the table. Delivery trucks. Storage buildings. Shipping containers. Maps. This organization never communicates directly. Every message is hidden. Every order passes through several people. No one knows the full plan. Daniel looked at one photograph longer than the others. It showed an ordinary delivery truck. The company name sounded familiar. He suddenly remembered seeing the exact same truck delivering food to the prison every Tuesday. His stomach tightened. What if they're already inside? Rebecca looked up. "What do you mean?" "The supply trucks." Without wasting another second, the investigators rushed to the loading dock. A food delivery truck had just arrived. Workers were unloading boxes of canned vegetables, bread, and frozen meat. Everything appeared normal. Rebecca ordered every box opened. The workers looked confused. Box after box contained nothing unusual. Finally, Daniel opened a large sack labeled rice. Instead of rice, bundles of cash spilled across the floor. Everyone froze. Another sack was opened. More cash. Another. More money. Millions of dollars had entered the prison hidden inside food shipments. Someone had been using Blackstone State Prison as the safest bank in America. But before anyone could celebrate the discovery, one officer shouted from the entrance, "The delivery driver is gone." Daniel ran outside. The truck was still there. Its engine was running. The driver's door stood open. But the driver had vanished. Then Daniel noticed a small envelope tucked beneath the windshield wiper. His name was written across the front. He slowly opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Daniel's younger sister, Emily, walking out of her apartment earlier that morning. On the back, only 5 words were written. "Stop digging, or she disappears." Daniel Brooks stared at the photograph until his hands began to shake. It was his sister. Emily was smiling in the picture, carrying groceries as she walked toward her apartment. She had no idea someone had been watching her. Special Agent Rebecca Turner took the photo from Daniel. "When was this taken?" Daniel looked closely. "The clothes she's wearing, she wore those yesterday." Rebecca's face became serious. "This is recent." Daniel reached for his phone and quickly called Emily. 1 ring. 2 rings. 3 rings. No answer. He called again. Still nothing. His heart raced faster. Rebecca placed a hand on his shoulder. Don't panic yet. But Daniel could already feel something was wrong. A team of federal agents was sent to Emily's apartment immediately. Daniel wanted to go with them, but the warden stopped him. If Mason Reed is behind this, leaving the prison is exactly what he wants. Daniel hated hearing those words. But he knew the warden was right. Someone was trying to distract him. Back inside the prison, investigators searched every corner of the food truck. Hidden behind one wall, they found a small metal compartment. Inside were several prepaid cell phones. None of them had names attached. Each phone contained only one saved number. Every phone called the exact same person. But when investigators traced the number, it had already been disconnected. Another dead end. Hours later, Rebecca received a call. She smiled for the first time that day. Emily is safe. Daniel let out a long breath. Agents had reached her apartment. She was frightened after seeing the police outside, but she had not been harmed. The photograph had been a warning. Nothing more. At least for now. Rebecca looked at Daniel. They're trying to scare you. Daniel nodded. It almost worked. That evening, Daniel returned to cell block A. He stood outside Mason Reed's cell. Mason slowly closed his book. I heard you've had a busy day. Daniel ignored the comment. Did you send that photograph? Mason smiled. You give me too much credit. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to believe only what you can prove. Daniel stepped closer to the bars. People outside are risking their lives because of you. Mason remained calm. People make their own choices. Daniel waited for him to say something else. Instead, Mason picked up his book and continued reading. The conversation was over. As Daniel walked away, Mason quietly spoke without looking up. Officer Brooks. Daniel stopped. Sometimes the person standing beside you is more dangerous than the one inside the cell. Daniel slowly turned around. But Mason had already returned to reading. Those words echoed inside Daniel's mind. The next morning, Rebecca gathered everyone inside the investigation room. We've reviewed every employee who has worked here during the last 5 years. She pointed to a large board filled with names and photographs. Most have clean records. Some have financial problems. One person stands out. She placed a photo in the center. Officer Carl Harris. Daniel stared at it. No. Rebecca nodded. Carl has unexplained bank deposits. He was on duty during every 9-second camera failure. He approved maintenance access for Eric Lawson. Daniel couldn't believe it. Carl had trained him. He had shown him around the prison on his first day. He had warned him to stop asking questions. Suddenly, everything made sense. Investigators quietly searched Carl's office while he was working another shift. Inside a locked drawer, they found several expensive watches, stacks of cash, and a notebook filled with coded numbers. Rebecca carefully opened the final folder. Inside was a detailed schedule of prison guard rotations. Someone had marked the safest times to reach cell 214 without being noticed. Daniel felt sick. Carl had been helping Mason all along. The team prepared to arrest him quietly. But when officers went looking for Carl, he was gone. His uniform had been left inside the locker room. His car still sat in the parking lot. It looked as though he had simply disappeared. Then the control room called. All units, report immediately. Daniel and Rebecca rushed upstairs. One technician pointed at the security screens. Someone had logged into the prison computer system using Carl's access code. The login had happened less than 1 minute earlier. The location appeared on the screen. Cell Block A. Daniel and Rebecca ran down the hallway. Several officers followed behind them. As they reached cell 214, they found the door standing open. Empty. The bed was empty. The chair was empty. The history book lay open on the floor. Mason Reed was gone. A prison-wide lockdown began instantly. Every gate closed. Every officer searched every hallway. Every inmate was ordered back into their cells. No one could understand how a maximum security prisoner had vanished. Daniel searched maintenance tunnels beneath the prison. Rebecca searched the administration offices. The warden checked every exit. Nothing. It was as if Mason had disappeared into thin air. Then one young officer shouted from the old prison chapel, "I found something." Daniel rushed inside. Behind the wooden podium was a narrow staircase leading underground. The hidden passage was covered in dust. It looked centuries old. Fresh footprints covered the floor. Someone had used it only minutes earlier. Daniel switched on his flashlight. The tunnel stretched into complete darkness beneath the prison. He took one careful step forward. Then another. Far ahead, he heard the sound of a heavy metal door slamming shut. Someone was still inside the tunnel. Daniel tightened his grip on his flashlight and started running toward the sound. Without realizing, he was about to discover the secret that had allowed Mason Reed to build a criminal empire from behind bars for more than a decade. Here's the conclusion that wraps up every major mystery while keeping the ending satisfying and documentary-like. Daniel Brooks ran through the dark tunnel as fast as he could. His flashlight bounced across the damp concrete walls. The air was cold, and every footstep echoed through the narrow passage. Ahead, another heavy door slammed shut. "Stop!" Daniel shouted. No one answered. Special Agent Rebecca Turner and several officers caught up with him. Together, they pushed through the steel door. On the other side was an abandoned maintenance room hidden beneath Blackstone State Prison. Old pipes covered the ceiling. Broken tools lay scattered across the floor. But what caught everyone's attention was the equipment. Several computers were still running. Small radios blinked with green lights. Maps of cities across the United States covered one wall. A large whiteboard listed dates, delivery routes, fake business names, and coded messages. Boxes filled with prepaid phones, memory cards, fake identification cards, and stacks of cash were lined against the wall. Daniel looked around in disbelief. "This wasn't just a hiding place," he whispered. "It was a command center." Rebecca nodded. "For years." Investigators immediately secured the room. Computer experts carefully copied every file they found. The evidence was overwhelming. Mason Reed had never needed to leave prison. His organization operated like a machine. Each person knew only one small part of the plan. Hidden codes inside library books pointed trusted visitors toward the next message. Invisible ink on letters confirmed new instructions. Maintenance workers secretly moved messages through vents and floor drains. Corrupt employees created the 9-second camera failures that allowed information to move unnoticed. Food delivery trucks carried illegal money into hidden storage areas beneath the prison before it was quietly moved outside again. Nobody except Mason understood the entire operation. That was why the organization had survived for so many years. One investigator called from the far end of the room. "We found another tunnel." Everyone rushed over. The tunnel ended at a thick steel hatch hidden behind an old storage building outside the prison walls. Fresh tire tracks covered the dirt. Rebecca examined them. "He escaped this way." Daniel looked down the empty road. Mason Reed had only a small head start. Within minutes, state police, federal agents, and local officers surrounded the entire area. Roadblocks appeared on every highway leading away from the prison. Helicopters searched from above. Hours passed. Just after sunrise, a highway patrol officer spotted an abandoned delivery van parked near an old warehouse. The back doors were open. Inside were prison clothes, one history book, and an empty coffee cup. Mason had changed into ordinary clothes and disappeared again. The search continued for 2 more days. Then everything changed. A truck driver called police after recognizing a man from the news at a roadside motel. Officers quietly surrounded the building. Daniel and Rebecca arrived moments later. They carefully entered room 12. The television was still on. Maps covered the table. Several phones were charging. Mason Reed stood beside the window. He looked surprisingly calm. "You found me," he said. Daniel raised his weapon but kept his voice steady. "It's over." Mason slowly smiled. "No. It really is. Rebecca stepped forward holding a thick folder. It ended the moment we found your command center. She opened the folder. We've already arrested Carl Harris. Mason's smile disappeared. We found Eric Lawson. Still no response. We've arrested the drivers, the money collectors, the fake business owners, and the people carrying your coded messages. Daniel watched Mason's face carefully. For the first time, the man looked worried. Rebecca continued. Every computer has been copied. Every account has been frozen. Every message has been decoded. Your empire is finished. Mason looked down at the floor. Years of planning had collapsed in less than 3 days. Without another word, he slowly raised his hands. The officers placed him in handcuffs. This time, there would be no hidden helpers. No secret tunnels. No missing camera footage. No coded messages. The investigation lasted nearly a year. Dozens of people connected to Mason's organization were convicted for crimes ranging from money laundering and fraud to conspiracy and corruption. Millions of dollars in illegal money were seized before it could be used for more crimes. Blackstone State Prison replaced its entire camera system. Every employee passed new background checks. Hidden tunnels were permanently sealed with reinforced concrete. Library procedures changed. Mail inspections became much stricter. The prison became one of the most secure facilities in the country. Officer Carl Harris admitted that greed had pulled him into the operation years earlier. He accepted responsibility for helping move messages and allowing security failures that kept the criminal network alive. Eric Lawson was captured several months later while using another fake identity in a different state. As for Daniel Brooks, he received national recognition for refusing to ignore the small details that everyone else dismissed. A missing notebook. Tiny pencil marks. A blank letter. 9 missing seconds on a security camera. Each clue seemed unimportant by itself. Together, they exposed one of the largest criminal operations ever controlled from inside a prison. Years later, investigators still used the case to train new officers. They reminded every recruit of one important lesson. The strongest prison walls cannot stop crime if honesty disappears from the people guarding them. And sometimes, the smallest clue is the one that brings down the biggest criminal empire.